Good afternoon. So my name is Richard Span, and we're going to be going over some addictive and unhealthy behaviors for you and your sports team. Presentation. Yep. Okay, so types of problems. So some of the things we're going to cover are going to be substance abuse, eating disorders, compulsive gambling, and those are all clinical problems that require treatment by specialists. So those are not problems that any individual person can solve, or a member of the team or a coach. You're going to need to go to a certified specialist in order to solve those issues. But anyone can detect signs of these issues occurring. So you can notice if someone's gambling compulsively or if they have an eating disorder. You can notice the signs and symptoms, which we'll cover those later. And you can try to speak up and have that individual seek help. There we go. All right, so anorexia nervosa and bulimia, they're two of the most common eating disorders that there are. Generally, the characteristics of anorexia nervosa are going to be weight. It's about 15% below the average weight for an individual, depending on their height and their age. An intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, even though they're very clearly underweight, they still have a debilitating fear of being deemed fat. And for females only, if they have an absence of at least 3 consecutive menstrual cycles, that's also another key sign of anorexia. For bulimia, diagnostic criteria includes recurrent episodes of binge eating. So that's going to be 2 episodes a week for at least three months. They're going to have no control over eating behavior during their eating binges. So they're just going to eat uncontrollably. And then they're going to have regular self-induced vomiting, use of laxative or diuretics, strict diet or fasting, or vigorous exercise to prevent weight gain. They could have a combination of any of those. They could utilize laxatives and also vomit at the same time. Another key thing you want to look for these individuals is, obviously the health issues of repeatedly vomiting or using laxatives or diuretics, especially if they're athletes. You're going to have a higher risk of dehydration because they're purging their entire bodily fluids. So those are like the extreme examples of eating patterns. I wouldn't say that the majority of eating disorders fall into those. There's also the notion that there are disordered eating patterns, which is just a spectrum of exaggerated eating patterns. So think of anorexia and bulimia as more of a polarized view of an eating disorder, where there's a spectrum in between where people may still have eating disorders, but they may not be as extreme to go to the lengths of deeming them diagnostically or having them diagnosed as, anorexic or bulimic. But some of the predisposing factors include weight restrictions and standards. So athletes who need to make weight in wrestling or boxing or MMA, that's where you could see a lot of that being prevalent, because they will do anything to make weight to make sure that they have the opportunity to either, continue forward in a tournament or fight for a championship, whatever the case may be. Sometimes there's coach and peer pressure. It's relatively common in gymnastics. It's a very big emphasis on keeping them at a certain weight to make them more competitive. There's socio-cultural factors like social media. So, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even TikTok. There's a certain body type that's deemed attractive in our culture today. And that could create pressure on individuals to look a certain way, which, if exercise and diet alone isn't enough, they may be prone to resorting to eating disorder type habits in order to get that ideal figure. Performance demands. Some athletes think if they get lighter, they'll be able to perform better. So it could be runners, cyclists, whatever the case may be. They may believe that if they get a little bit lighter, they keep themselves at a certain weight, they'll be more competitive in whatever their designated sport is. And then there's a notion that judges will be more favorable to individuals who have a better physical appearance, a healthier physical appearance. So some may feel that they get, unfairly characterized or judged based off of their weight, or if they seem to appear overweight, that they may get judged a little harsher than those who appear to be more in line with the ideal body type. Female athletes report higher frequencies of eating disorders, generally more common in females than males. There's a good percentage of athletes that do engage in some type of disordered eating, and that includes binge eating, fasting, vomiting. But again, that could include athletes like boxers or wrestlers who may feel they need to do that in order to get to a certain weight. Up to 66% of female athletes may be amenorrheic. compared with approximately 2 to 5% of non-athletes. And then compare with non-athletes, athletes in sports that emphasize leanness, they're at a greater risk of developing eating disorders. So again, that goes back to like gymnastics or maybe even figure skating, something where, you generally want a lean appearance. Those individuals may feel more pressured to engage in disordered eating or even go to the extreme of anorexia or bulimia. This just goes deeper into some of those predisposing factors that I mentioned. So some of these examples, so like I mentioned with the weight restrictions, weightlifting, boxing, wrestling, coach or peer pressure, that's a big one, especially for this demographic. So, athletes may hear certain comments from their peers or the coaches, and those things could actually trigger an emotional response to where they want to change their dietary habits to make sure that they don't get those negative comments or that negative peer pressure. And it's just more examples of those predisposing factors that I went over. So performance demands, some athletes feel a lower body fat percentage, like bodybuilding, for instance, is obviously a key thing for that appearance when they're being judged on stage. And then here's the important part, dealing with eating disorders. So some of the positive methods for helping an athlete deal with them is you want to be supportive, you want to be empathetic and realize that, it's not their fault. You want to do what you can to help them out. You want to emphasize healthy nutrition and how important it is to have healthy nutrition. And then you want to make sure they get to a specialist. Like I said before, only certified specialists are qualified to treat and really deal with the process of improving a person's dietary habits. Anyone can notice the signs and symptoms and, understand what's going on, but you need to make sure they get to a specialist in order to get the help that they need. Some of the things that you do not want to do and you want to make sure you avoid are holding weigh-ins as a team where everyone's looking at their weight, seeing what they weigh. That's where you get the judgment, the critiques, the whispering. Sometimes you may get some ridicule based off your weight or appearance. And that goes along with singling out the individual in front of the teammates. You definitely don't want to do that. You want to avoid putting any added pressure to look a certain way in front of other people, peers, coaches, family, friends, even strangers alike. And the problem should only be discussed with non-professionals. It's not necessarily a HIPAA violation because, you're not a medical provider, but it's a sensitive topic that, you would like to keep limited to as many people that can actually help the issue. So you yourself talking with that individual and referring them to a professional. If it's a younger athlete, maybe involving their parents, but that's about as far as it should go. So some of the signs that you can look at, individuals with anorexia, they often pick at their food. They push it, maybe you see them playing with it on their plate, but not really actually eating it. They'll lie about how much they ate that day, or they'll just kind of like do certain patterns when they eat. So example here is cutting food into small portions and eating very low calorie bland foods in order to minimize their calorie intake. Individuals with bulimia, they often hide food or they just, as soon as they're done eating, they may go to the bathroom or they just disappear. Or they generally just try to eat alone. So that way no one can see how much they're eating or how little they're eating and what they do afterwards. Just looking at exercise patterns alone isn't a great indicator of an eating disorder because you need to also verify that their weight, their mood regulation, and their eating habits have to be taken into account. So you can't just say someone's exercising too vigorously, in your opinion, so they have an eating disorder. They could just be training up for a tough event. So you need to make sure you think about the holistic problem. So weight, mood, eating habits, and exercise habits together will give you the best idea of what's actually going on. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, please reach out and let me know.